Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and today we're taking things in perhaps a little bit of a different direction. Something a little different than usual. We might end up at someplace familiar, but bear with me. Something as usual, as always. Something crossed my path, as it were, that inspired me to devote today's live stream to its exploration, the conscious exploration of what I'm referring to as the dark trinity, also known as the dark triad. Now, the perceptive among you may notice a rather peculiar background. This apparently is from an anime called The Dark Triad. And I must confess, I know nothing about this anime. I have never watched it. I've not seen it. I have not read about it. I've not heard about it. I don't know if it is based on a manga of the same or a different name. All I know is that when you do a Google image search for Dark Triad, this anime pops up. Now, hang on one moment. Well, perhaps I can get this on screen here. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, that's actually not what I wanted to show you. But anyway, oh, this. Okay, I sent over the wrong. Okay, this is what I wanted to get to. So you do a Google image search for dark triad demons, and what you end up with is these images from this, whatever this is, this anime, and these different characters which relate to this particular anime. And apparently, if we zoom in on, well, I guess I didn't want to do that, did I? Let's say if I do this and say open, can I open image in new tab? Hopefully we can just get to the image. Okay, that's pretty good. So apparently, if you read this, this is apparently this dark triad according to this anime, and these different characters. Vanessa has curse, warding, and blood magic. Dante has gravity and body magic, and then there's Xenon, the one with spatial and bone magic. These are these characters. Presumably, these are three necromancers or magicians, or God only knows what they are. But these are the characters in the dark triad of this anime. Why do I mention that? Because this is where I found the source, the inspiration for the background, not for the subject matter, just for the background. Because this character, who I think is the leader of this dark triad, or somehow an amalgam or something, you see he's grasping at me. He's about to capture me. He's about to enslave me. And this is the topic of today, is the notion that the number 3 is, we know it to be the law of creation, the creative law of the universe. Masculine, feminine, and union of masculine and feminine. This is how the universe creates. This is how we procreate. This is how, in consciousness, we create experience. There's an expression through consciousness, and there must be a reception in consciousness. And in the field where an expression unites right? There's the third factor, the third force. When expression unites with reception, that expression and reception create experience. That's the cross, right? That's where masculine and feminine cross. That's the experience. And this is the bare minimum required to create. But mechanicity, mechanical phenomena, cannot create. It does not possess its own consciousness. So it doesn't function and operate in the consciousness field as pure consciousness does. So in order for it to function, it must possess consciousness. It must trap. It must capture. It must take, appropriate, consume, and ingest, and hoard, and accumulate. It cannot create of its own conscious volition. It must, like any parasite, right? It must have a host. It must take in order for it to exist, essentially, in order for it to be and to know itself, and to experience as at some level of consciousness. It is conditioning consciousness. It is taking it and making it its own, and then projecting through that consciousness and interpreting via its own mechanical set of deterministic rules. That's what an algorithm is, and that's what an algorithm does. So, but how does it capture and accumulate and enslave consciousness? How does it possess consciousness? And is it possible that since everything, according to the Hermetic law of correspondence, as above, so below, and since it has been said that the adversary, Satan, the devil, Lucifer, whatever, in whatever context you want to understand this, mechanical nature, if you will, it can only mirror, it can only ape or dupe. It is a shadowy reflection of the supernal worlds. The infernal worlds are the inverse, like the yin and the yang, in that sense of duality. It's the opposite. But in that opposition, can it be any other than its own trinity of sorts? If we have the Trinity, the triunity, the law of three above, the creative law of the universe, could it be that the destructive law of the universe, the entropic law, the consumptive law, which is really a better word than destructive, because energy is neither created nor destroyed, but it can be consumed. And this is very interesting, because when we contemplate the difference between those two words, right? Creation and destruction, and we think that those are the opposites, but that's not correct. It does not correspond to the law of conservation of energy and the law of the transformation of energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It is constantly moving into and through and out of form. It is being transformed. And consciousness that is consumed, it's not destroyed, but what happens to it? It becomes part of the matrix of what consumed it. It becomes the body of the consumer. You know that old expression, you are what you eat? And then when many times I've talked about impressions as food, what we take in through our five senses, not only what we eat and drink physically, but what we take in through our senses metaphysically, sensations, images, sounds, thoughts. These are all impressions. And the energy of those impressions and the nature of those impressions have an effect on us because we are taking in those impressions. And if we do not transmute those impressions, if we do not transform those impressions, if we do not digest them consciously, then our three brains and our many egos will digest them mechanically. And those impressions will be lost on us. Any significance, any meaning, any purpose in those impressions are lost. And only the base sensations or the base mechanical aspects of those impressions are digested, but they're not digested by us consciously. They're digested by our human machine and by our egos. And so they end up feeding our egos, not our soul, not our being, not our consciousness. So with that little summary on related aspects, related topics, a little refresher on energy is neither created nor destroyed, but is moving into and through and out of form, that transformation takes place through interaction, and consciousness itself can therefore be consumed and become trapped inside the body of what consumed it. And that entity grows because consciousness is an energy and it has characteristics, it has abilities and powers. We know this. Consciousness is one of the most prized resources in the universe. It is truly a metaphysical currency. Energy flows. And you know, there's this expression in the New Age, especially in secretarianism and manifesting your desires and whatnot. They have this idiom, this expression. They say energy flows where attention goes, and that focused attention can direct energy. And this is true, and we know this is true even by virtue of our own practices surrounding pranayama and surrounding white tantra. Anybody who practices Tai Chi or Qigong, anybody certainly who practices martial arts knows that they can direct the sexual force. You can move it, you can project it, you can focus it just with focused attention, with concentration, with conscious awareness, presence, and relaxed but focused concentration. You can direct that energy. And we know that If you have any children, or if you have a pet, be it a dog or a cat, even a bird, it doesn't matter. Fish, okay. But if you have a pet, you know how often your pet or your child is hankering for your attention. They want some attention. And if you're working on the computer, your cat will come and lie down on the keyboard. Why? It's perfectly logical. It's perfectly natural. You seem to be giving all this attention to the keyboard. That keyboard is getting quite the massage. The better you are at typing, the more your cat becomes envious of that keyboard. Your cat says, no, 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 no. Those are my fingers. That's my masseuse. What the hell is that piece of plastic getting the massage that I want? Because that massage is attention. It's not just the sensation of massage, it's the attention that you're putting into it. And the more focused and concentrated you are in your work, right, the more that your dog or your cat or your child is going to come over and try to get some of that attention, because they can sense the focus, and they feel and they long for inherently that energy, that attention. It's a currency. It's a metaphysical currency. Who doesn't love being listened to? I mean, really listened to. When someone really listens to you and they're really paying attention, and they're like hanging on your every word, like their life depended upon hearing this story that you're telling them. Doesn't that make you feel fantastic? Isn't that the greatest feeling? Knowing that you're loved, and knowing that somebody cares about what you have to say. So when you come home and you're telling your spouse about your day, and they're actually listening to you, instead of just yes, yeah, 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 right? And then you ask them a question, you're like, oh, what was that? They weren't really listening to you. They were just going through the motions, right? Listening is a skill. And the reason why it's a skill is because listening requires focused attention, focused concentration. And the focus of your attention on the person that you're listening to, if you're not there, if you're not doing that, the person can feel that, the person can sense that. And then how does that feel? When someone is nodding their head and saying, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear, but they're not really listening to you. Well, animals feel this, all beings feel this, all conscious entities feel this. Because to commune with consciousness is the longing to experience that, is the longing of the universe to experience itself, to know itself. And that knowing is a conscious, comprehensive knowing. It's the knowing through experience of that consciousness, conscious experience. So consciousness can be consumed. And when it is consumed and filed away, much the same way that if you and I eat too much sugar or too many calories, too much, goodies, too many goodies, too much junk food, our bodies will store that away. We call it fat, right? Adipose tissue. We get fat, right? We start growing love handles and bellies and all the rest of it. And our body will store that as fat. And that energy that was consumed in whatever form that it took, sugar or carbohydrates, potato chips, ice cream, whatever it was, that gets transformed and processed by the body and gets stored as fat. And we call that gluttony, in a sense. Well, mechanical nature, which cannot produce consciousness on its own, it has no consciousness of its own to work with. It has to consume that which was consciously created. And its nature is deterministic. And its nature is fear, the primal survival instinct. To exist, because it frankly doesn't exist. It's an illusion. But so to be, to feel alive, it must hold on to the consciousness that it has. And out of fear of losing that consciousness, that is death, when the consciousness leaves the physical body, there is fear holding on to that consciousness, desperate to hold on to that consciousness, i.e., desperate to remain alive. So that entity of fear will consume and hold on to as much consciousness as it can while it can. And it will try to rule, to dominate consciousness while it can. Because without consciousness, there is no fear. Fear dies. It has no, it's just an empty algorithm. It's just like a mathematical formula that's neither being read. It's like an algebraic formula that just has the letters in it. No numbers being put into it, right? It's like a toaster without bread. What is a toaster without bread? Sure, you can say it's a toaster, but is it really? Is it really a toaster? Does a toaster have any purpose in a universe without bread? And if you can use your imagination and try to contemplate your existence as a toaster, when your whatever primitive understanding of yourself that you have, you know that all you are capable of is making toast. But to make toast, you need bread. And so to feel alive, to feel useful, to feel like you exist, would you not seek out sources of bread? And would you not hoard as much bread as you can so that you can continually make toast and continually fulfill your meaning and purpose in existence? This would be your sole purpose, would be to accumulate the bread needed for you to be able to make toast, because you're a toaster. What else are you going to do? And this is all well and good. This is all fine, abstract philosophy, esoteric, metaphysical philosophy. But it doesn't get at the crux of the issue that we're looking to explore today. How does a toaster come to possess and hoard bread? How does a toaster do this? By what means can mechanical nature consume and possess and enslave consciousness? And if the creation of consciousness and conscious experience relies on the law of three, does it not follow that its inverse, the consumption of consciousness and the enslavement of consciousness, would also rely on a triad, a dark trinity? At the outset, I mentioned that we would be looking at different expressions of this dark triad phenomenon. The second one, the first one, this I had to go with the anime first because I had to explain this ridiculous background. Okay, but this is a member of this dark triad in this anime, whatever that is, that is reaching out to grasp, to consume, to enslave me and my consciousness. That's the explanation behind this this graphic. However, what other common how big is this? Is that, no, that's pretty small. What about this one? Oh, that's better. Okay, so open image and new tab. Let's take a look at this for just a moment. This is the dark triad according to modern psychology. The dark triad. Now, this is actually not the best graphical depiction of this. Simply because, let me see if I can. Okay, yeah, this is better. Open image and new tab. Okay, here. What I want is a Venn diagram. And there you go. We have a Venn diagram now. Okay, so where each of these aspects, these elements, where they cross over to create the dark triad of psychology. Now, these are, of course, deserving of some explanation here. And they're not necessarily in the best order, but let's start with narcissism. Let's start in the bottom left here. Let's start with narcissism. You know narcissists. I'm sure you know, we all have a general understanding or appreciation of what narcissism is, and that you know narcissistic people. And we observe narcissism and narcissistic people all the time. People who are self-obsessed and people who suffer from, too much self-love or too much self-loathing. But they suffer from excessive pride. And we can throw some names around if you want some examples, but you can come up with your own. And there are plenty of examples from your personal life and from public life, because narcissists very often, not always, but very often do seek, they're attention seekers. And a lot of those attention seekers come from a place, well, we'll get there. They're coming from a place where they require that validation. They require the validation of others, right? They need the drug that is applause, right? In the term in terms of a performer, someone who performs live in front of an audience, the ovation that they receive at the end of their performance, there's no drug like that, right? That's that the adulation, the appreciation, the validation of the public, right? Many narcissists seek that and need that. They desire that. But there's many, many different ways to achieve that kind of validation. It doesn't necessarily mean having to be in the public eye. Some narcissists prefer the shadows, or they're introverts. They don't like being out in public. They don't like all eyes on them, but they will do things anonymously, or they will be in the background, and they will work on projects or products or something, and then they will create even maybe a brand or a character or a book, and they will even write under pseudonyms. And then this mysterious whoever behind whatever receives all kind of public adulation or recognition, or makes millions of dollars, or whatever the case may be. And then the individual behind it all, in secret, in private, quietly, without any fanfare or anybody knowing it, they relish that. They quietly sit there, reveling in indulging the fact that they were the ones behind this, and that it's their secret. That's an extra little bonus, that's an extra little thing that only I am worthy of knowing this, the truth, that I'm the one who's behind this thing. So in many ways, even someone like Batman, the archetypal figure of Batman, in that sense is narcissistic, because he has this secret, right? The alter ego, right? And he says, well, you put on the mask for this reason and that reason. He has all these rationalizations out there. But one of the things that Bruce Wayne relishes more than anything is pretending to be Bruce Wayne. And when he's playing that billionaire playboy asshole, right? And he's playing it up, and he's relishing the fact that he's playing it up, and people are buying into it, and that they're buying his act hook, line, and sinker, and they're falling for his narcissistic billionaire act. Well, he relishes that. He likes that game. He likes playing that game because it puts him above everybody else, right? In the same way that he's above the law, because that's how a vigilante thinks. That's how a vigilante does. I've got to be above the law and outside the system, because these freaking cops and these district attorneys and everybody else, they don't know what the hell they're doing, and they don't know what they're dealing with. They can't handle the Joker. The Joker is way out of their league. Two-Face, way out of their league, right? So extraordinary opponents, right? Desperate times calls for desperate measures, and extraordinary opponents require extraordinary individuals to step up, and that's vigilantism. So, but that vigilante can have an alter ego, right? So he goes like what's his name? Daredevil from the Marvel universe. Daredevil is essentially like the Marvel universe's Batman. There are other characters like Moon Knight. Moon Knight is another one. Like Marvel has several contenders to that you can compare with Batman. But maybe I mentioned Daredevil because he had his own Netflix series, and he's the one that's daytime he's a public defender and so on and so forth. But at night he puts on this mask and he plays the role of the vigilante and so on. So all of that we can use to describe the narcissist, and there's more that goes into narcissism. But this is the first of this so-called dark triad of psychology. The second, we'll go to the bottom right-hand corner, is psychopathy. And by psychopathy, we're essentially talking about psychopaths. Now, one important thing to note when, narcissists are, we all know that people can have narcissistic traits without being a full-blown clinically diagnosed narcissist, right? So there are elements of what they call subclinical narcissism. Means you have some narcissistic tendencies, but no psychologist or psychiatrist would diagnose you as being a fully blown pathological narcissist, right? So they refer to this as subclinical. It's a fancy word for saying there are degrees of this. These are personality traits. These are aspects. So when it comes to psychopathy, the psychopath, their defining feature is a lack of empathy, a lack of compassion. They frankly just don't care about other people. They are only really concerned with themselves and their own desires and their own goals in any given moment. And they disregard any effect that they might have, positive or negative. They really just don't care. And if they cause other people suffering, it's water off a duck's back for them. It just doesn't enter into their calculations that's just not important to them. And metaphysically speaking, it's like they are handicapped. I hesitate to use the word retarded, but their emotional empathy is, they suffer from an atrophy or a retardation of their capacity to empathize. And it's like that they're blocked. That channel, that ability to connect with others and feel others' pain, they're like cut off from that. So they literally cannot feel other people's pain. Whereas myself, and I'm sure you can relate to this if you consider yourself to be an empathetic person, I see somebody, give themselves a paper cut and I feel it, right? I hear someone talking about how they sprained their ankle that morning and I feel it, right? It's like I have too much empathy. It's like the connection is too big and too strong. Psychopaths, there's a zero. And subclinical psychopathy has degrees of this. So they're still capable of caring about others, caring about relationships, caring about outcomes, and certainly caring for their own. Psychopaths often have very, very strong attachments to certain people and even animals, like their pets and so on. And they can have extreme attachments and really do care about certain outcomes. But beyond that, where individuals suffering has no bearing on the outcome that they're concerned with, psychopaths just lose that attachment or lose that connection, or they never had it in the first place, as is better explained. So this lack of empathy is that psychopathic tendency that is the second aspect of this so-called dark triad, according to psychology. Now, the last one, I left the best for last because it's the most fun. And that's Machiavellianism. Now, the reason why this is so interesting and the most fun is because Machiavellianism is the archetypal villain, the villainy, the hyper intelligent, super intelligent, crafty, clever, skillful, strategizing, manipulative, two-faced, but charming and highly intelligent, well-spoken, and well-mannered, self-controlled individual. This is the Bond villain, okay? This is Moriarty, right? Sherlock Holmes' nemesis. The Machiavellian, this is Bill Clinton, okay? And this and you know, Barack Obama and others, okay? These are the people that you can't help but admire them on multiple levels, because they are so practiced, they are so disciplined, they are so methodical, that these it's interesting that even though the term Machiavellianism comes from the fellow Machiavelli uh, from Italy, who wrote the book The Prince, if I got that title correct, Machiavelli, yeah, it's The Prince, right? And it's a handbook, it's a guidebook. It's like he wrote the rule book for the Game of Thrones hundreds of years before J.R.R. What's his name? Before the I'm so bad with names. Before George R.R. Martin wrote Game of Thrones, which he based loosely off of British history, The War of the Roses, is what he loosely based Game of Thrones off of. But the rule book that his characters follow was written by Machiavelli. And it's that sneaking, that conniving, that controlling, that manipulation, and that putting on airs in public, and having multiple different levels of things operating. Like, so you have subtext under subtext under subtext under subtext. So you have one conversation happening on the surface, but then beneath the table, people are stabbing each other with their forks and knives, right? That's Machiavellianism. And what's fascinating to me is that this is a real person. This is his actual name. But the first part of that word, right, is it's like it's begging to be a synonym for machination. Like, Machiavellianism, it's perfect, because it's the Machiavellian is all about mastery of machinations, right? Pulling the levers, pressing the buttons, pulling the strings. These are all machinations. And it's ironic that the world of psychology includes Machiavellianism in their dark triad, when in fact there is no clinical pathological definition for this. Psychologists do not treat Machiavellianism. You or I cannot go in to a psychologist or a psychiatrist and walk out with a prescription to treat our Machiavellianism. There's no such condition. And yet, it's part of the dark triad. Narcissism, psychopathy, these are clinical terms and can be diagnosed clinically. But Machiavellianism cannot. Perhaps because it's so common and so far-reaching, or perhaps because it is so elusive that it defies clinical diagnosis. It defies a clinical description. Narcissism, psychopathy, those are relatively easy to define and diagnose. It's pretty easy to spot a narcissist or a psychopath, right? If a child pulling the heads off of small animals, right? A child like gleefully inflicting pain on animals, there's something going on there, right? Because the child can't empathize with, and he's gleefully inflicting pain. There's some pretty strong evidence, pretty strong signs of what you're working with there. But a child who spreads rumors in class, and a child who lies a lot and lies and carefully plans out his lies and his deceptions in order to get what he wants. So a child who, let's say, I don't know, plays his two parents off of each other, whispers lies into one parent's ear, whispers different lies into another parent's ear, in order to, so that he conspires to get his way, to get his parents to either get into a fight or to come to some conclusion as to how he should be treated. That's Machiavellian behavior. But how do you diagnose that? And first of all, how do you catch it? And then when you do, how do you reproduce it in a clinical setting? Right? Well, show me the test. Because the whole definition of a Machiavellian personality is that they're two steps ahead of you. Anything that you try to come up with to test them, to diagnose them, to figure out, like, this is the whole story of Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty, his arch nemesis, is that despite the fact that Sherlock Holmes is, quote, the world's greatest detective, he cannot foil the world's greatest villain, the world's greatest criminal, because Moriarty is a criminal mastermind who's always one step ahead of Sherlock Holmes. The Machiavellian is always one step ahead of the law, right? So in many ways, the Machiavellian is precisely that sort of adversary that is outside the scope of law enforcement and the legal system, which inspires what I was talking about earlier, the righteous narcissist to step up and become a vigilante. Because it's like, to take down the Machiavellian criminal requires a kind of, another genius, but someone who thinks himself above the law, thinks himself on that level. So there is you might say, a positive version of the Machiavellian, right? The Sherlock Holmes type, the genius, right? The heroic genius, or the billionaire philanthropist who happens to be a ninja and a martial artist to boot, and an inventor. That's Batman, right? So, okay. These three overlap. And where they overlap Psychology calls this the dark triad, where an individual can exhibit traits from each of these personality types. And you can use your own imagination and your own experience and your own understanding of history, or indeed present day politics, to determine individuals who fall in the middle of that, in the middle of this Venn diagram, that exhibit to one degree or another traits from each of these personality types. And that psychology, of course, and history and sociology, applying this dark triad to individuals, be they present or past, use this map as a way to evaluate the intentions of said individuals. So if you wanted to choose an individual who is very prominent and dominant on the world stage right now, you could take that individual and look up all of the unique personality traits associated with each one of these personality types, and then go down that laundry list and check off all the personality traits that this or that world leader exhibits. And based on that, you could decide whether or not that world leader is potentially out to enslave humanity. Right? It's exactly what a rational mind would do. It's logical. It's exactly what a rational mind would do. This is the blueprint. This is the right. This is the template. If somebody lines up with the template, then they exhibit aspects of the dark triad, and chances are that they're up to no good, that they're only out for themselves, that they have no empathy for the rest of humanity, and they're completely self-focused, and they'll do and say and do just about anything, and they will go about tinkering with the machinations and altering whatever they need to alter in order to achieve their goals. The narcissist, the psychopath, and the Machiavellian, right? This, however, doesn't help us in understanding how humanity is enslaved. This is a superficial diagnosis at best. And the reason I wanted to have a Venn diagram of this. Oh, hang on a second. Before I continue, there's a comment here. I'm sorry, I missed them. The comments are so far off to the side for me now that I have to expressly look at them, otherwise I'll miss them. Benjamin Raphael says, Justin Trudeau and his circle at the World Economic Forum exemplify these traits. Even Jordan Peterson has publicly suggested that Trudeau displays strong narcissistic tendencies. Yeah, certainly. No question. No question. You can find people who map on to the dark triad. Certainly, without question. But it doesn't get to the heart of the question that we're here to answer today, which is how would these individuals enslave humanity? This is just a description of the kind of individual who might want to enslave humanity. But this doesn't answer how. But it's been called the Dark Triad, like our anime was called the Dark Triad. And it also doesn't answer why. In a way, it answers why, because you say the Machiavellian is obsessed with their goals, the narcissist is self-obsessed, obsessed with themselves, right, and what they want. And the Machiavellian will do anything and do any machinations to get what they want. And the psychopath doesn't care about anybody else and doesn't care about who they step on or who they hurt or who they kill in order to get what they want. Okay, we've established that. But if what they want is to enslave humanity, none of these descriptions answer the question, why? Why do they want to enslave humanity? And certainly, it doesn't answer the question of how. This is only an expression of who. Who might want to enslave humanity? And this who is an externalized dark triad. This is a description of people, of personalities. I can do you one better though. If this is not enough of a distraction, okay, a jangling of keys for the rational intellect to become oh, wow, and hypnotized with and to chase after, I can do you one better. Because there are other dark triads. Right? There's even more dark triads out there lurking in the webosphere. And hang on a second. Now this one again, it's going to be, okay, so to find this one, I'm going to cheat by putting two of the names. Okay, let me see if I can. Okay, I found it. It might not be the best image, but let's go with it. And oh no, it's shitty, tiny little. I want one that has the names, because the names are important. Maybe I will cheat and go to pull up. You know, it really burns my biscuits when I do a search prior to the live stream and what I'm looking for comes right up. And then I accidentally close the window or something happens because we're looking at other stuff. And then when I go back and do the search again, it doesn't show up. It always burns my biscuits that these search engines are so hit and miss. After all these years, you would have thought that they worked this out by now. Let's see. Okay, so oh, okay, that's not bad. Okay, we'll work with that. So forget about that. What if I do this and say I can't? Okay. All right, so this is an Instagram post, and this has, as you can see, the Dark Trinity. Another one, another dark triad. And this one, as you can see, was prepared by senior lead pastor Landon Scott. Now, it's interesting because at the bottom here it says spiritual warfare back to Baal, or Baal, or however you think that's supposed to be pronounced. But here we have this trinity, this triad of demonic entities. And of course, they are oriented in this anti-trinity, this truly dark trinity, where we have a substitute for the Father, and we have the unholy spirit, or the divine mother Ishtar, and then we have Moloch, or Molech, or we have the unholy Christ, or the Antichrist, even. But any case, it mimics the Christ, mimics Jesus. And this came up, in the search for Dark Trinity. And again, we look at this, we say, okay, but isn't this just another version of who? If we call these three arch demons of the abyss, right, enslaving humanity, does this get us any closer to why or to how? It's just, and even if you say, well, of course, the devil, Satan, these are his three lieutenants, and he organizes them in this way, and they create this false trinity, this dark trinity, and they use this, and this is what they enslave humanity with. And I'm like, well, okay, I don't know about you, I don't see many of the normies running around worshiping Baal and Moloch and Ishtar. There aren't many churches to these entities. People don't go around praying and worshiping them. This is not, and even if you could identify specific attributes associated to each, this still wouldn't answer the question of how. How does mechanicity, mechanical nature, the darkness, consume consciousness? This doesn't get us any closer. It's just another interesting substitution. It's just talking about who. It's just another substitution of who. But not, and it's a substitution of what, really, but not why and not how. So how useful is it? It might feel good, and certainly for Christians, and certainly for individuals that I watched an interview about someone talking about these entities and relishing how evil they are and how conniving they are and this and that. And, that truly, he was describing these entities as, truly Machiavellian in that sense, conniving, scheming, right? Makes us feel good to be able to point fingers and say, they're those demons out there in the world. They're the ones that are enslaving humanity. But again, jangly keys, clever distraction, gets our attention away in a weird sort of reverse kind of idolatry. Because of course, idolatry is that mistake of spending all of our time and energy focused on the symbol instead of what it symbolizes. And focusing on this dark triad, this dark trinity, and focusing on these three characters doesn't get us any closer to learning how humanity is enslaved. But remember, the notion of a dark trinity, I brought that up. Because it was based on a hunch, on an intuition, and on an understanding of the Hermetic principles, and a knowledge of and a direct experience of the Holy Trinity. And the law of three. And that if the creative law of the universe, the law of three, creates, could it not be that the law of consumption would also be a law of three, a triunity, a trinity? It was a hunch. It was an intuition. But that intuition led to, the dark triads and the dark trinities, and even an anime that we still know nothing about. This is our first clue, or rather, our clue to the first element of the dark trinity that we're here looking at. How does mechanicity enslave consciousness? What in the past hour we have spent exploring dark triads, dark trinities. Whoops. You guys all went away there for a second. All my windows went away. Okay, here we're back. Okay. So we spent the first hour looking at dark triads, dark trinities. And we were looking at them, we were exploring them in the context of psychology and certainly like religion, right? Spirituality, I guess, or right? These are, and yet, and then of course entertainment, which is the background, right? The anime. But we are no closer to answering the question. We are no closer to verifying the intuition. But if we left it to our rational mind, we might walk away believing that, oh, okay, I had an intuition that there's a dark triad, a dark trilogy at work enslaving humanity. And I would have found this from the world of secular psychology. And we would have found this from the world of dogmatic religion. Two completely different flavors. Or we would have come across this from Japanese manga, anime, entertainment, a modern mythology, if you will, a mythological entertainment expression And we might have gotten wrapped up in watching this program, and who knows how many episodes there are. Or if it's a film, it might be a film, or it might be a TV series. Who knows how many we might get caught up in watching over and over. We might start binge watching it on Netflix, or who knows. The point is that just today we've spent over an hour essentially distracted, being misled, being misguided, misdirected. We were encountering versions of what we were looking for, versions that matched certain criteria related to our intuition, to the thesis that humanity, if the law of three creates the universe and births consciousness and conscious experience, then surely there are three elements that somehow work together to consume consciousness, to enslave it, to hoard it. and we were given, and here they are. Here, or if you're religious, here. Or if you're neither, and you just like a good story and you want some other mythology, here. Three different dark triads for us to get caught up in, to identify with and become attached to, believing that we now have the answer. But none of these get us any closer to knowing. What they do, in fact, is they lead to our ignorance. And they lead to our ignorance through this misdirection, this deception, this creating a reasonably hand-drawn facsimile that looks the part, that sounds the part, that's oriented in the right way. Oh, psychology, and these are wacky, crazy people, or religiously, and these are demons. And the demons are all about possession and all about messing with humanity and messing with God. But there's no word on how. But therein lies the key. Since I was making it clear and making it conscious and above board that these were talking about who, they weren't talking about how. These were scapegoating. They were pushing off they were putting the blame on and avoiding the how and the why. But if you were a normie and would look at this and say, okay, there's my answer. Because the brain is lazy. The mind is lazy. Mechanical law of conservation of energy. It wants to do things with the least amount of effort. Here's your answer. Oh, okay. Now you would walk away believing that you know. You would still be ignorant. You wouldn't know how anymore, but you would think you know how because you found this or you found that. You would have been hypnotized by one or the other, or the third, if you got caught up in the anime show and you ended up binge watching it and you forgot all about what you were doing and what the question you were asking in your thesis and your intuition in the first place. Hypnosis, in other words. An illusion which is designed specifically to keep us in the dark, to keep us ignorant. I have before explained that this word gnosis is so powerful and so pregnant with meaning that it requires two words to describe its antithesis. How many times have you heard the expression? Now, these are related. Hypnosis and ignorance are related, okay? But they are not the same. How many times have you heard and heard me say it like a broken record where you're sick of hearing it? But how many times have you heard that the forces of evil, the forces enslaving humanity, that division, separation, whereas gnosis, okay, gnosis is a synthesis. Let me let's pick blue here. Thank you. Okay, here. Okay, I'm just going to use perception. And expression. Why? Because gnosis is, and how many times have you heard me say this? And this is something you'll hear only here, because I coined the term and only, right? Self-evident experiential knowledge. That's what gnosis is. It is the synthesis of reception or perception and expression. And that, as I expressed before, that synthesis of perception is feminine and expression is masculine. And the union, this is where you get this triad, this trinity, these three elements that creates gnosis. So what are the three elements that what are the three elements then? Well, we have hypnosis and ignorance that divides and conquers, but divides and conquers what? Who? This is the third element. And why our previous examples, the examples given to us by the internet, are so insidious. Because what did I say about each one of these? We were looking for the what and the how. And what did they give us? Who? Who is responsible? Who is enslaving the world? Who is enslaving humanity? And that if you're looking for what's enslaving your consciousness, well, then look to Machiavellism, narcissism, and psychopathy. These must be the three things because they're the dark triad. And these are personality traits. Has nothing to do with consciousness. Nothing. These are scapegoats. These are false idols to distract us from the third element of the dark triad, which we call the self. The I, right? Me. This is the separation that takes place. It is only natural. It is only if gnosis, self-evident experiential knowledge, conscious knowing is in consciousness. But that belongs to the consciousness, to the self, to the self, capital S, to the being. Through hypnosis and ignorance, dividing and conquering gnosis, that knowledge, that self-knowledge, the consciousness is extracted, consumed, if you will, and it grows, it nourishes that which consumes it. So what consumes it? The consciousness gets bottled up inside the I of the false self. What is it that you identify with? When you look in the mirror, who do you see? Do you see your higher self? Do you see your innermost being? Do you see God? Do you see an essence, a spark, a seed of the Christ? Or do you see the mortal self that you call I? Where does the consciousness go? That's where the consciousness goes. But that self is an illusion. It is an artificial intelligence, if you will, the mind. You think you know who you are. You think you're this body, you think you're these thoughts, you think you're this mind. And when I say you, I mean, generally speaking, and the norm is in most people, right? Dividing and conquering through the creation of an illusion. or you could say a virtual self. Let me make this bigger so you guys can see that. The mechanicity, the mechanical forces, the consciousness is consumed. It's consumed by the I, the me, the illusion that the consciousness becomes hypnotized with, and becomes ignorant of the self, the true self, self-knowledge, the knowledge of the being, the knowledge that you are the being. And how many times have I described it as the difference between someone who's trapped in an MMORPG and they forget to eat, they forget to sleep, they forget their friends, they forget to go to work because they're totally consumed and obsessed with the game world, that they forget themselves, the player. Well, something very similar is going on in this touchy-feely three-dimensional reality that has been given to us, that we become completely identified with, hypnotized by. And we, this physical body, this mind, this personality, i.e., our persona, our character, our in-world character, our in-game character, and this mind, this large language model, this AI, that appears to be intelligent, these are the three components that humanity is enslaved, that enslaves humanity. You have to, it's not enough to just use hypnosis in ignorance. It must result in a new sense of self, a false sense of self that becomes the storehouse, the prison of the consciousness. And to use the parasite analogy, right? It is the psychological aggregates, fear, pride, lust, envy, greed, gluttony, these mechanical algorithms that are just algorithms. They don't exist. They're like lines of code. They're like malware. But malware has to attach itself to something. And by creating, by each one of those algorithms, psychological aggregates, malware, presenting themselves as an I, each one announces itself and presents itself as an I and hypnotizes us with a craving or an aversion that makes us forget who we really are, makes us identify and become attached to whatever it is they are tempting us with. And we are divided, we are separated from ourselves, and we become consumed with the object of the temptation. And when we indulge that, and we identify and become attached to that pleasure or pain, and we identify that as, I recently read a post in a Buddhist group, the Buddha talking about I like, and how the phrase I like And we think it's such an innocuous phrase. I like this, I like that. It's innocent, right? It's natural. It's perfectly okay. I like this, I like that. But that this that the Buddha was making it clear that every time you say I like, you're reinforcing the bars of your own prison. Because who likes? Who likes? Where is the judgment coming from? I like this, I don't like that. Isn't that just a euphemism for I want this, I don't want that? Isn't I like steak, I don't like fish? Isn't that just a euphemism for I want steak, I don't want fish? I want pleasure, I don't want pain? Isn't it just a desire? Isn't like just a a, a softer, like I said, a euphemism, a softer version of an expression of a desire? And who likes? You see, this is the insidious nature of the real dark triad, is that when you look it up on the internet, they give you these bullshit entities, or personality types for you to scapegoat. So that you do not direct your scalpel of conscious investigation to the real culprit. By the way, this self, this I, the virtual self, or you might better know them as, right, the false self, in Arabic and in Hebrew, that self was called shaitan, Satan. Three elements, a dark triad, enslaving the consciousness, consuming it, and enslaving humanity. And there it is, the big guy, the big name right there, Satan. It's not outside of you. There is no Satan out there. There isn't. It's your own individual shaitan that is enslaving you in your consciousness, that has divided and conquered you, and that it has you in hypnosis and ignorance, that is enslaving humanity. One person at a time, one shaitan at a time. Because remember, as above, so below. If you can accept that in your heart of hearts, you have this spark, this seed, this essence of God, which is your being within, and that God is the amalgamation, the perfect multiple unity, the Christ in activity is the perfect multiple unity of all these seeds, all these essences, then wouldn't it make sense that the Satan of the Bible of religion that everybody likes to point fingers at and scapegoat as the cause of all of our suffering and all the evil in the world, wouldn't it make sense that that Satan too was an amalgamation of all of the false selves? Why would it be one way above and a different way below? Understanding, of course, that in the infernal worlds, the Black Lodge has its hierarchies of demons and archdemons and so on, just like the supernal worlds has its hierarchies of seraphim and angels and archangels and cosmo creators. So as above, so below. I'm not saying that there are no entities named Baal and Moloch and Ishtar, and I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that those demons don't exist. They do. But right now, the focus of today was, how is humanity enslaved, and is it a trinity, a dark trinity, as above, so below? And it is. It has to be. Because if gnosis, if consciousness is a synthesis of masculine, feminine, and their union, and experience, experiential knowledge, is a synthesis of perception, expression, and their union, then to capture the consciousness, to release it, it's like breaking apart an atom, and what gets released is all of that energy. Well, you break apart knowledge through hypnosis and ignorance. But the energy has to go somewhere. So where does it go? It goes into the false self, into shaitan, which is an amalgamation of all of our egos, which are the ones that are after the energy, that are after the consciousness, that all want to feel alive. And how do they feel alive? Because the consciousness that they feed on, the consciousness that they consume, gives life to the me, myself, and I that they are using to hypnotize us with. And it's this crazy circular thing, which is why they always have to feed and feed and feed and feed, and why it's never enough. Because that consciousness is feeding into this illusion, and that the a machine is voracious. A toaster doesn't make toast once and is satisfied. No. Look at assembly lines. Look at machine. How many? I've described it very often. You look at the machines, they want to run. An engine wants to run. If an engine stops running, it dies. Period. Engines don't sleep. They don't rest. If they stop, they die. They have no purpose. They have no meaning. They're no longer running. They don't exist. From any practical standpoint. So they constantly need to feed. And what does the I feed on? Attention, consciousness. Now, I wanted to mention this, or bring this about, this conversation, because as you know, AI is all a buzz. The world is a buzz with AI. And a lot of people are looking at, and they're talking about the AI bubble and how it's going to burst, and how they're spending billions of dollars on these data centers. And companies like NVIDIA that make GPUs, okay, graphics cards, for video games, for gaming PCs. They have now earmarked, like, the vast majority of their production of video cards, of GPUs are going to be, are spoken for already, and they're going to be sold to these AI companies to build these data centers, these massive server farms that are so-called going to be powering the AI revolution, and so on and so forth. And these server farms consume massive amounts of water for cooling, and it's ridiculous. And you're looking at this saying these companies are burning through billions of dollars every quarter, and they're not making any money. And when you look at the technology, it's just large language models. There's no intelligence there. It's just a very clever statistical analysis, probability analysis engine, what they're calling AI. So you go, what's really going on here? What's really going on? Now, when I wrote my book, I wrote a chapter, as you know, or may know, I wrote a chapter that focused on, obviously, mechanical nature and three elements. Now, VR and AI, right? You should be familiar with virtual reality, artificial intelligence, right? Transhumanism, the third element here, this is it's fallen off the map. It's fallen off the radar. Nobody talks about it much anymore. Despite the fact that Elon Musk bought a company whose name eludes me, but it was the company that was putting chips into monkeys' brains. And with this monkey computer interface, these monkeys were able to play rudimentary video games like Pong and Asteroids, and they were able to, they achieved there it is. Thank you so much, Benjamin. Neuralink. Thank you. That's the name of the company that Elon Musk bought. And this company, Neuralink, was putting in chips, and Elon Musk was saying how important this development is going to be, because he was using his fear tactics, saying that AI is going to be so powerful, and artificial general intelligence, when they achieve it, is going to be so super intelligent and super powerful that in order for it not to subjugate and enslave and or destroy humanity, we have to have the power, the ability to interface with that AI in order to be able to control it, to have some modicum of control, right? So that's why Elon Musk bought Neuralink, in order so that human beings aren't left behind. Now, there are other individuals like Raymond Kurzweil, who I've talked about in the past. There's a documentary that you can find. I believe you can watch it on YouTube. It's called Transcendent Man. It's about Raymond Kurzweil, or Ray Kurzweil. He is the human machine interface guru at Google. He made his fortune. He pioneered robotic limbs and artificial limbs and other robotic systems and machine systems to aid handicapped people In other words, so those people who had lost mobility, they lost dexterity, they lost vision, or other senses, right? So they were handicapped or disabled in whatever way. Raymond built his company around helping these people using technology, and so his whole modus operandi was reducing the gap between man and machine. So to create an interface so that man and machine could work together to meld into one. And he coined the term transhumanism, and he also coined the term the singularity, because he envisioned a moment when an artificial general intelligence who had access to the internet would become so super hyper intelligent that no one can see past that point into the future. Because at that point, when we create a artificial general intelligence that is that super intelligent, the future is wide open, and that the future of humanity, and that he believes, is that this is the next evolution of humanity, for us to merge with machines. And he's not the only one, because Peter Thiel, co-founder of PayPal, also believes this. And there are many in the billionaire sphere and many in the tech sphere who believe this wholeheartedly. This is their philosophy. This is their religion. They absolutely believe, and even Joe Rogan has several times expressed that he believes that it's inevitable that we human beings are going to want to transcend the limits of our biology and our physical brains, and the limitations of our neurochemical mind. And so the idea of virtual reality and artificial intelligence as uniting, coming together in a human machine interface to create this next evolution of the human being, this human that transcends the limits of its own humanity. Well, there you go, transhumanism. But you don't hear about transhumanism anymore. They don't talk about transhumanism. If you turn on the business channel, nobody is talking about anybody pouring billions of dollars into transhumanism. No. They only talk about this. And this, right, this AI is BS. There's no intelligence there, because there's no consciousness. And this virtual reality stuff, well, that's no mystery. The video game industry dwarfs all other entertainment industries combined. All other media, all other arts combined, including sports, does not compare to the video game industry. What is the video game industry? Interactive virtual reality. That's no mystery. But they haven't called it VR, really. I mean, they have, but they haven't. The actual VR with the headsets, okay, didn't really catch on, but it doesn't need to, right? Not when you've got companies like Neuralink learning how to. Okay, well, we'll get to that. And AI is not AI at all. Okay, AI are LLMs, large language models. They have language, and they can use statistics and conditioned learning and their algorithms to predict what words follow what words, or what images go together. But they don't know what they're doing. They don't know because they have no consciousness. And I outlined all of this in my book. I explain this very clearly. But what then is the missing link? What's missing from this triad? Let me refresh your memory. Okay? This bottom, if I draw a triangle here, hang on, let me just get, if I okay, right? If I draw the inverted triangle, and remember gnosis, so remember this is we're equating this to consciousness. And the question was, how do we capture consciousness? How do we extract the consciousness from gnosis? You divide and conquer, and then the consciousness, right, becomes trapped in the false self, gets extracted and gets consumed by the I, the virtual self, the false self. That is, in a very real sense, a devolution of the soul, the spirit, the monad, into a false self. Now, understanding the three components: hypnosis, ignorance, and the false self, the virtual self. Now let's go back here. I said that AI, LLMs, they call it artificial intelligence, but it's bullshit. It's not intelligence. What they call AI, Gemini, Google Gemini, ChatGPT, they don't know anything. And they hallucinate all the time. But they don't really know. And when someone doesn't know, by definition, we call that ignorance. And virtual reality, right? When I describe someone getting lost in an MMORPG, someone getting lost in a video game, you can even get lost in freaking Candy Crush Saga on your phone. Or look at all those poor people blowing those elderly people blowing their retirement money in casinos on those virtual slot games, right? They're just video games. They're just fancy video games. It doesn't matter if they're photorealistic or not. It's when you lose yourself, or people that binge Netflix for hours and hours and hours at a time, and you lose yourself. This is that virtual reality is hypnosis. And if what they're after, the currency that they're after, is consciousness, attention, because that's what's going to power the AI. That's what's going to give the AI the G in AGI. That's where the intelligence will come from. The knowing will come from the consciousness. That they are extracting that has to go somewhere. And we said that somewhere is the false self, the I, an illusory, imaginary, mechanical avatar that now enslaves and entraps a human consciousness, and they call it transhumanism. But you have a virtual reality and an LLM and an AI LLM bot, a chat bot, and through this process of hypnosis and ignorance, a human consciousness can be captured and uploaded into a system to create a transhuman, part human, part machine. And as I said, Ray Kurzweil, Peter Thiel, and many others have gone on the record as saying that they believe that the next evolution of humanity is to merge with machine, and or that they want to achieve immortality by uploading their consciousness to a virtual reality. And then that virtual reality, they will need to inhabit a character, a bot, a chat bot that can process language. But they need to be able to interface with that chat bot, not through a keyboard, not through spoken words, but directly through via consciousness. And then they can embody a virtual character in a virtual world, but be conscious and bring consciousness to it. Now, if you're a billionaire, what better use of all of your money and your time and your energy and your resources than creating the platform, the technology, the server farms that are powered by NVIDIA GPUs, graphics processing units, that have been developed to do what? To be able to create photorealistic virtual reality and power LLMs. But it's interesting how they're using GPUs. They're not using workstation computer chips. They're not using Intel workstation chips that were normally used for server farms. No, they're using GPUs, and they're saying, oh, well, because it turns out these GPUs are so much more efficient and effective at doing AI stuff and blah, blah, blah. No. GPUs are really good at virtual reality. I'm telling you that this AI bullshit, it's the dangling keys. It's the distraction. It's what's hyping everybody up and getting all these investors and billions and billions and billions of dollars and companies on board and everybody to pour money into the creation of these enormous server farms. And what they're not talking about is they're not talking about this, and they're not talking about this, because they're giving you the dangling keys, right? AI and AGI, which is bullshit, because there's no intelligence without consciousness. But they're working on that. But they want to freely give. They want to be able to upload their consciousness into this system and call it transhumanism. And remember, so, right, you see the connection. But because that's a machine, this is people freely enslaving themselves to mechanicity. This is people imprisoning themselves as transhuman entities. This is people, you know what this is? This is from the movie The Matrix. This is Cypher making a deal with the agents to sell out Neo and Trinity and Morpheus in order to be able to get himself reinserted into the Matrix. That's what this is. And mechanical nature is using fear of death, to get these billionaires to blow all this money and all these resources. And normally the billionaires are very environmental. They're very pro-environmentalism and anti, what do you call it, global warming and everything. But these server farms consume billions upon billions and billions of gallons of water every month. There's nothing environmental here. And look at all the energy that's going into these places. I promised in the description of today's live stream, I said that if we can determine what are the 3 elements by which the dark Trinity enslaves humanity: hypnosis, ignorance, and the false self, the false sense of I, a false personality, a false persona. We can look at the world, and anybody offering anything, if we can peel back the layers and bear down and realize the congruencies, we can determine the ultimate nature of that enterprise and what its true purpose is. And if its purpose is hypnosis and ignorance to attract consciousness and embed that consciousness into a new self, whether it's transhuman, it's a false self or a false identity or a title, a new identity. So, for example, we can do this exact same exercise, this exact same test we can do on a cult that uses indoctrination, a charismatic leader, and ritual to create hypnosis and ignorance in order to indoctrinate new members who then identify as members of this organization, members of this church, members of this spiritual commune, members of this cult or secret society. Ooh, I'm now a member of the secret society. I have been initiated into the secret society, and I now identify as a member of the club. I have exclusive privileges, and I have new powers and new abilities and access to secret knowledge. And I from that point forward, I see myself as different from everybody else. I've evolved, I have transformed, I am this, I am that. And it's all ego and it's all pride. And it's the conscious getting bottled up in mystic pride. It's being enslaved. It's a way to enslave humanity. And this works. You can now take this simple equation, this simple modus operandi, and apply it to political parties. You can apply it to, you can apply it to identity politics. You can apply it to members of any club. You can apply it to fandom. You can apply it to like sports fans and fanatics. You can apply it to just about anything that concerns the human condition. And there are degrees, obviously, there are degrees. But show me a way that humanity is enslaved that does not follow this pattern. even if you talk about slavery, you talk about slavery proper, the only reason slavery ever worked or ever works, because the end goal of slavery is to get the person who is being enslaved to identify as a slave and identify as your slave. Hundreds of years after slavery ended in the United States, and decades after segregation ended in the United States, you still see people trying to wave that banner and trying to in order to get reparations and so on and so forth. They're still trying to use the identification with slavery. And my ancestors were slaves, therefore I'm underprivileged. I'm downtrodden, and I'm a victim. I remain a victim today. I remain a victim of slavery hundreds of years after it ended. Because that identity is so strong, that false self. It's so hypnotic. But that prison is not easily dissolved once it's established. But this is why in Buddhism especially, they go on and on and on about identification and attachment, and not to identify. Benjamin says, this is how elites impose their beliefs on the public, often while masking a far more troubling agenda. It's presented as something beneficial, yet in reality, it risks harming humanity. What's being sold are illusions, nothing more. Well, that's very much the point of why I wanted to talk about this, is because of this AI bubble, this AI mania. And I wanted you guys to see and know and be able to use this methodology to judge for yourself and apply it in your own life, and apply it else in other aspects of the human condition, other aspects of society, of history, of politics. And you will see this pattern repeated over and over and over again of dividing and conquering, leading to some kind of newly defined human, a new person. I'm a new man. How many times have you heard? How many times did we hear that expression in advertising, in stories, in people saying, "Oh, and I went through this, and I'm a new man, and I'm a this now, or I'm a that now, and I'm a," right? And and over a year ago, January of last year, I dedicated several live streams to talk about self-help and these self-help gurus. This absolutely applies to the self-help movement. That it's all about creating a new you and the life that you want. But you have to reinvent yourself to be able to manifest the life that you want. Well, the reinventing of yourself is a process of hypnosis and ignorance. It's just replacing your present level of ignorance with a new it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're replacing one level of your ignorance with a different level, because you're hypnotizing yourself with a whole new story. And the end product is a new you who's positive, who's energized, who's a warrior, who's going to attract and manifest what he wants, who takes life by the reins and creates the world and creates the life that he wants for himself, right? It's basically creating a new you, creating a black magician. But it's enslaving your consciousness inside of that new you. And you might be able to manifest your desires, but those desires that you're manifesting are being created with the energy of your consciousness and your sexual force, which is finite. To all those people manifesting all that stuff, that's why you hear stories about adrenochrome and the elite and blood rituals and blood sacrifice and the sacrifice of children. And that's why it was so dominant in the times of Babylon. That's why we have abortion clinics everywhere. It's a blood sacrifice. It's sacrificing the unborn. It's a sacrifice, child sacrifice. And all of that energy, that raw human creative energy that is completely innocent, is going and is being consumed in order to be able to manifest all of this stuff. And who knows, and all of the energy that's being used to create this monstrosities, these so-called server farms for so-called AI that supposedly, as Benjamin points out here, they're promising, it's going to transform the world and it's going to lead us to the new renaissance of humanity and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, they're building them so that when the apocalypse comes, the elite think that they can upload their consciousness into these server farms and live forever in a virtual reality. And they think they're getting that they're getting a good deal, that they're smarter than everybody, and that they're gonna buck the system, or they're gonna game the system, and they're gonna come out on top. They don't realize that they're already enslaved to humanity. They're creating a whole new level of hell to enslave themselves in. They're creating a whole other. It's like, the nesting dolls, the Russian nested dolls. That's what they're doing. It's like they're adding another doll. It's like Inception, that movie Inception, where it's a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. That's what they're doing. They're adding another level, another layer of illusion, of hypnosis and ignorance. And they're calling that new existence transhumanism. And they're calling that the next evolution of humanity. But it's a devolution. It's devolving. It's a devolution ever deeper into mechanicity. Anyway, I started out with a thesis, with an intuition. That intuition is, if the creative power of the universe is the power of three, the law of three, and if the Trinity is how the universe creates, then by God, Hermes Trismegistus was onto something with his principles. As above, so below. The darkness can only mirror the light, but mirror it in a conditioned mechanical way. And what do they do? What do they have? We have a dark trinity, a dark triad. And you know that I'm onto something with this, because when we look on the internet to see what the internet says about dark trinities and dark triads, it gives us this and it gives us that. It gives us distraction. It gives us misdirection. It gives us other who's to blame. right? Oh no, it's a psychopath, it's a narcissist, it's a Machiavellians, they're to blame, or it's Baal, it's Moloch, it's Ishtar, it's Satan, it's all the demons, they're to blame. No, no, we have no one to blame but ourselves. Because mechanical nature is not out there, mechanical nature is in here. The adversary, our individual shaitan, is in here, and that is where our consciousness is enslaved. We need look no place else to free and liberate our consciousness than from ourself. But if you, and that's why, right, the antidote to hypnosis and ignorance is gnosis, what we seek, self-evident experiential knowledge. And if we can eliminate our hypnosis and eliminate our ignorance through conscious comprehension, which we seek, and we can synthesize gnosis, and we can dissolve the elements of our false self, we can dissolve the I, this false self that we identify with, and release the consciousness. And that consciousness, liberated from the false self, can then return to the higher self, the true self. And we can liberate, we can be liberated. I was just about to ask if anybody has any questions, and Benjamin, looks like Benjamin has given us a doozy here. He says, do you think it's possible that the forces driving the push to merge human consciousness with AI are rooted in something more metaphysical than technological, perhaps analogous to fallen angels, disembodied spirits seeking permanence or continuity? It almost reads as if there's an awareness of eventual judgment, similar to the biblical account where the spirits called Legion pleaded to be cast into the pigs rather than face immediate destruction. The parallel is striking, at least on a symbolic level, I'm guessing is what you wanted to write. Remember, Benjamin, there's a limit of how long you can make these comments on StreamYards. So I'm assuming that was the end. The parallel is striking, at least on a symbolic level. The short answer to your question is yes. In fact, I write about this clearly in my book. It's not technological. It is precisely metaphysical. In my book, I explain that the dawn of VR, AI, and transhumanism was not the 20th century. The dawn of VR did not happen with the Atari 2600. And the dawn of transhumanism did not begin with Raymond Kurzweil. This is just the end game. The technological manifestation and expression of this is just the end game of the Black Lodge. It's the end game of mechanical nature. And remember, when I say mechanical nature and when I say the forces of mechanical nature, I'm talking precisely about those entities that in Sufism, they refer to as jinn. And in Christianity, we refer to as demons. And in all religions and all spiritual traditions throughout all time, there have always been these entities that have been there to harass and to possess and to dominate and to control humanity. And they have found all manner of ways to do that. It just so happens that technology since the dawning of the Iron Age, technology has dominated humanity. And the so-called meteoric rise in humanity's technological capabilities has simultaneously resulted in a similarly shaped curve of loss of consciousness. And you look at young people today walking around staring into their phones, and you can see that transhumanism is already here. It's just that that phone is not yet physically embedded in their bodies yet, or they are not metaphysically uploaded into the server, into the cloud yet. But you know people who are attached to their cell phone like with an umbilical cord. It's like an appendage. If they don't have it near them, they start getting frazzled and antsy and anxious because, oh my God, where's my phone? Where's my phone? I can't be without my phone. But it's no different than, I don't know, in the past when a gentleman, felt naked if he didn't have his sword by his side, or if he didn't have his pistol on his hip. He wasn't complete. He was vulnerable, right? That we have had these tendencies for a long, long time. There have been ways that our psychology has messed with us, that mechanicity has found ways for us to identify and become obsessed with objects and mechanical things. Think of all of the idolatry in the world, not just now, but throughout all time. And if you reread that chapter of my book that starts on page 113, talking about the dawn of VR, AI, and transhumanism, you reread that chapter and it'll all be clear for you again as well. I'm not talking about technology. Technology is just the end game. The end game of a strategy that the Black Lodge has been playing for thousands of years. Thousands of years. Benjamin says, thank you for the clarification. It seems to me that the idols or false gods of the past have simply taken new forms today, technology being one of them. In many ways, it appears to exert a similar kind of influence, quietly shaping and even constraining human consciousness. I appreciate the insight. Again, I shared this with you. We walked through this today for a reason. And I promised in the description of today's live stream, and I hope I delivered, through this analogy, this case study. It's not even an analogy. It's an analogous case study, that what happens internally, psychologically with us, is repeated over and over and over again. And even though we didn't necessarily walk through it for each and every case study, I mentioned politics, I mentioned cults, I meant and you talk about, like, when you talk about idolatry and idols, these are like false religions and worshiping false gods. That's what those are. And those are entities, demons that have come and influenced people to create religions. And those religions end up worshiping mechanical nature. They worship demons. Look at all of the what do you call it? The primal nature worship, nature idolatry, paganism, where the inherent divinity found in nature, the creator spirit that created nature, and all of that beauty and everything is twisted, and through a process of hypnosis and ignorance and the heavy use of psychedelics, you end up with nature idolatry and people worshiping mechanical nature. And what do they become? A different kind of transhuman. What do they become? They become primal. They begin devolving. They become, let's call a spade a spade. They become savage. They lose their civilization. They lose their written communication. They lose what they previously had as they identify with mechanical nature. And they take on a new identity of the stewards of the jungle, or the stewards of the and but or the siblings of the beasts. Right before, we recognize that animals are animals and humans are humans, and we belong in different kingdoms. But if you have noticed, there's been a tendency, and I've called her out several times, that intellectual whore, Jane Goodall, who has hypnotized the world into believing that chimpanzees and the great apes, they're just like us, they're our cousins, and they're trying to win empathy and sympathy and for these apes that are absolute savages. Chimpanzees are absolute savages. They will tear a human being limb from limb if you look at them the wrong way. And they tear each other limb from limb. And they go on raiding parties, and they eat the children of their enemies, and they steal their females, and they wipe out the males. But Jane Goodall has convinced the world that they're cute and cuddly, and that they're our cousins, and we must find the kinship in them. But as I've explained many times over and over again, that chimpanzees are devolved human beings, where the hypnosis and ignorance was false nature idolatry and giving themselves back to nature, and the form of transhumanism was devolving not into melding with mechanical nature through digital technology, but melding with mechanical nature through biology. That is the Aborigine. That is the savage that goes on the devolving arc, and then hundreds, if not thousands, millions of years later, that giant who used to be a giant in Lemuria or in Atlantis now is a giant gorilla. And what used to be a human being is now a chimpanzee. Because transhumanism, right? If there's only one evolution, there's only one way to transcend humanism, and it's not physically, it's metaphysically. The only way to transcend mechanical nature and the limits of our physical reality and the limits of our humanism is to become gods, is to awaken and self-realize, to join the supernal worlds, to earn our place among the seraphim and among the angels and the archangels and the cosmo creators. That is our true nature. That is what we truly are. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Give the personality, the body, the mind, okay, back to mechanical nature. You leave it behind. That's the only genuine form of transhumanism. Trying to transcend humanism while holding on to what makes you this mortal, mechanical human machine, that can only lead to a Frankensteinian abomination. That can only lead to entropy, because mechanical nature and the laws of entropy, that can only lead to devolution, the downward spiral. And science fiction and fantasy, like I said, Mary Shelley and Frankenstein and countless other writers have explored this countless times in countless ways. But it is by no means isolated to technology alone. Technology is just one expression of mechanicity. Even the genius, Charlie Chaplin, who was divinely inspired, showed us in his film Modern Times, when he was going through the gears of the machine, and he was going crazy. And yeah, it was a comedy, but in that comedy, he was showing the folly of how human beings are not meant to work on assembly lines. That this is life-sucking, soul-sucking, back-breaking work. It's turning human beings into machines. And then Charlie Chaplin, in his profound film, The Great Dictator, at the end of that movie, he has that incredible speech that he gives. And in that speech, he says, do not be fooled by these masters of machinations. Do not follow these machine men with their machine hearts and their machine minds that would have you goose stepping into oblivion. Right? I mean, listen to that speech. You can listen to it on YouTube, online. And he specifically calls it out. Do not follow these machine men. There were no computers in Charlie Chaplin's day. There was no technology as we understand it today. But Charlie Chaplin was divinely inspired, and Charlie Chaplin had a vision. He could see, he could feel what these machine men with their machine minds, he could already feel into the future. And he could see that the spirit of transhumanism was already in these men, these industrialists. They were already possessed by the dark spirits of mechanical nature. They were already transhuman. They were already half machine. And he called them out. Do not follow these machine men. He called them out. And that was what, like 100, well, not quite 100 years ago. 75 years ago, at least. But you go a little bit further, well, around the same time, J.R.R. Tolkien was writing Lord of the Rings. And he said, I want to write a mythology for England before the Industrial Revolution wipes all of the nature off of the land. And when you watch Tolkien and you see Saruman and Saruman's speech when he's telling his orcs to rip down the forest and to tear down the trees of Fangorn Forest, and he's like dictating a letter to Saruman, and he says, oh, the forest will burn and the fields will collapse and everything will be consumed by the fires of industry. And Saruman is basically expressing a manifesto of the Industrial Revolution. And Tolkien despised that. Tolkien loved his idyllic fairy tale landscape of pastoral England and the highlands of the north of all of the UK. I mean, nature plays such a profound role in his mythology. But Tolkien never went so far as to become a pagan idolater of nature. He simply expressed and stood up for the beauty and the divinity of nature, which could not defend itself against the monstrous, incessant, insatiable hunger of the Industrial Revolution and that the big machine. That reminds me of artwork from Pink Floyd and others and other metal artists from the 80s that would show these ravenous, monstrous machines, just decimating the landscape, consuming everything. Because in that beauty and in that expression of God's creative wonder and magic, that consciousness, that machine was consuming all of that because it's voracious. Benjamin says, but the more concerning reality is that many in the younger generations seem to be adopting the same mechanistic mindset, much like the machine men depicted by Chaplin. Look, I'm not saying that you're incorrect. You're very much correct in that observation. But a reckoning will come, and a reckoning must come. And we are seeing signs of a backlash. We are seeing signs of like things go in waves, and trends and fads go in waves. And I recently heard a statistic that the number of baptisms is that people returning to the church, people returning to Christianity, the numbers of people returning to Christianity among Gen Z are higher than they've been for 50 years. So take that for what it's worth. But that generation especially feels that they have been robbed, that they have been denied something that they feel deep down inside of them. It's like oxygen, that something is missing, that they've been denied. And now they are turning away from technology. They are turning to the metaphysical. They are turning to the spiritual. They're turning to find community, analog, religion, the church. Fine. Let them seek wherever they have to go, wherever they can look. But they are turning away from the internet. They're turning away from TikTok. And they're discovering, at least they are acting upon, and they are seeking answers that they know there's something inside of them that has atrophied, that has not been properly nourished, that they've been denied that oxygen, and that they're gasping for that which they know they need. And so they have been returning to the church in tremendous numbers. And as a result, also, we see other statistics like the number of young people and Gen Z who have expressed a desire to have a traditional marriage and to start a family are greater in number than they've been in the previous generations. The problem is that they're in terrible debt and they can't afford to buy a house, which is why they're not getting married. So Benjamin says, I hope they will be led into the right path someday, God willing. Well, look, all of this is coming to a head, and God willing, someone will show up and will be at the right place at the right time with the right message, and to guide the movers and shakers of the world and lead them in the right direction to be able to change the macro environment and start shifting and altering the priorities of this humanity, because they need to start shifting, because the old way, the old game is over. It can't be about that anymore. It's not about that. And you know what? Even the billionaires know this, because guess what? They're blowing their wad They're spending all their money and their energy and their resources on this bullshit, right? Even the and when it's not this, they're buying islands and building bunkers, so they know that something's coming. Like intuitively, right? People know the jig is up, the game is up. They know, and but they know like a hunch, right? So, but they're so entrenched, they're so hypnotized, and people are creatures of habit, so they keep going on the treadmill, even as they want to but they want to hedge their bets. So they're building bunkers, they're buying islands, they're building shelters, they're building seed arcs, and then they're building server farms to upgrade, to upload their consciousness into. They're hedging their bets. Oh, and lest I forget, they're building rockets, and they're shooting rockets into space, and trying to get to Mars. Oh, and trying to get to moon. There's a new moon mission, right? So it's not like this is a real mystery. It's just like a chicken without its head. They're running around in typical way. They're trying to cover all their bases and all the possibilities. And well, hey, listen, if this doesn't work out, that'll work out. And if that doesn't work out, that'll right. It's hedging their bets. They're trying to play the statistics, play the casino the way they play the stock market. They're diversifying their portfolio of survival strategies, right? They're hedging their bets. But yes, Benjamin, I hope that the right messenger will come and will be at the right place at the right time with the right message, and that they will find their way. They will find a right path, and that God willing, the work in earnest on building the ark and raising and transmuting this humanity and civilization from what it is into what it could be and should be, and the building and the preparation of the ark can commence in earnest. I hope and pray with all of my being that that's the case, seeing as that's what I'm here to do. So well, there it is. Does anybody have any more comments or questions? We went a little bit longer today than we have been so far this year. I've been trying to wrap up within 2 hours, but for whatever reason, today we just today we went so long because we spent that time exploring what I called these false triads, these false dark triads. Where did the other one go? Oh, there it is. Right. And I thought it was important because that way I could demonstrate, we could experience the hypnosis and the ignorance, right? And the diversion away from the false self, the I, the false identity that actually enslaves consciousness by creating scapegoat identities for us to blame. And that this is one of the modus operandi of our ego when we get caught up in rationalization, in affirming and validating our behavior, and then we scapegoat others and we play the blame game. Well, if they wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't have done that, and well, what did they expect me to do? And so on, right? And so it's always diverting attention away from ourselves instead of accepting responsibility and looking objectively at ourselves. And so when we look to the methodology by which consciousness and humanity is enslaved, it's natural that the internet would give us ways to rationalize and blame others instead of looking within, instead of looking at ourselves, because nobody is enslaving our consciousness except us. We're doing that to ourselves. All right. I've already said everything that I need to say, and I probably said it 3 or 4 times now. So, in all honesty, it's time for us to wrap up. But I'll give you guys a minute or two if there's another question or comment that you guys want to type out really quick. Oops. I don't see anybody leaving any comments or questions. So, listen, everyone, thank you for being here today. I hope that you got something valuable out of today, and that you have a great week. Benjamin says, thank you for the insights you shared today, sir. Much appreciated. God bless. Thank you, Benjamin. First of all, you're welcome. And secondly, thank you for being here. And I'm glad that you got something out of it. And I hope the rest of you did as well. And I hope you have a great week. Hopefully, touch wood, the snow holds off and we get some more sunshine and so on. Because I don't know about you, but I certainly had enough of shoveling snow for a while. And I also did something to my knee. I like blew out my knee. It's awful. It's hopefully it's just a temporary thing. But have a great week, and I hope to see you next week. And until then, as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone.